Welcome to the world. Parts we are excited serve more than a day. We'll be here all week, providing you with critical information, talent discussion, news, performances, etc. Trying to help you create more awareness of what environmental justice is. I'm excited to have this next panel here. And the facilitator is Maddie Laupersert, and she is from the Campus Sustaining Fund at the University of Washington of Seattle. And Maddie, I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Thank you so much, Tony. Really appreciate you having us on here. So lovely. And I am also here with some folks from the Campus Sustainability Fund Committee, as well as some projects that are funded through the Campus Sustainability Fund. If you're wondering what the Campus Sustainability Fund is, we are a student-funded, student-run organization on campus at the University of Washington. And we do a lot of work with justice-centered sustainability, and we're also a grant-making organization, but I'll let some folks on the panel fill in some of the details. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. If folks on the panel can go ahead and say your name, organization, and your project role and project, that would be very lovely.
You wanna start on that end? Sure.
I'm Sarah Shores. I work with the Ground Shop at University of Washington, and I'm the recipient end of the Campus Sustainability Fund. And currently the project is salvage wood, where if a tree needs to come down on campus, we mill that tree and then we provide it to the students who build furniture out of that wood. So we're not paying for disposal fees, and it benefits the students as well.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Kimmy Forrest. I'm a master's student of landscape architecture at the University of Washington, and I'm also a research assistant on the Burke Meadow project with the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. And our project is a lot about ecological restoration of a Puget Sound lowland meadow and bringing students into that process. It's both a living exhibit and a living lab for students on campus.
Hi there, thank you for having me. My name is Kennedy, and I'm a descendant of the Grand Portage Band Chippewa tribe. I'm here as a First Nations representative to talk about our 54th annual Spring Powwow, a project that helps to uplift Native students on campus by showing Native resiliency and creating space for students who are pursuing higher education.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Clara Kreitziger. I use she, her pronouns, and I am part of the Campus Sustainability Fund Committee. So I am a representative for the UW Sustainability Department. And as a committee, we are involved in a lot of the grant making processes, including voting on projects, reading applications, decisions, etc. So really honored to be here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sophia Berkowitz. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the committee chair for the CSF committee. And yeah, so our committee is the one who does the voting on all of the projects, and we help to kind of work with project teams to make sure they are able to use the funds and get all of their amazing work done.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Brown. I've been with the Campus Sustainability Fund since 2021 and I'm currently serving as our manager of program operations. So good to be here today.
I realized I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Maddie. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the Associate Program Director of the Campus Sustainability Fund. Super excited to be on here today. We're going to be centering student power and perspectives within the University of Washington. And there's just so much incredible work being done on campus, powered by students. So let's get right in it. And my first question is, what does shifting the narrative of sustainability mean to you?
I can start us off. I think for me, a big part of the work that we do is around shifting that narrative and making sure it's not only about environmentalism, which I think is the classic definition of sustainability, but it's about so much more than that. It's about cultural sustainability. It's about environmental justice. And so trying to broaden that narrative and open up our funding and our resources to students on campus outside of just like classic environmentalism.
If I could go off of that, as a group, First Nations is really focused on resiliency within Native communities. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the past with colonialism, and especially just cultures kind of being a figment of the imagination or a part of the past. And I think it's really important to remember that we are an intertribal community that's like a minority on campus, but super represented by the idea of cultural sustainability and being able to have tradition in the way that we have a reciprocal relationship, even with the earth, be represented. I think there's a lot of importance on making sure that diversity is also prioritized.
Adding on to that, I would say a big part of shifting the narrative of sustainability is also thinking about who gets to share their narrative and who gets the opportunity to speak, and in doing so, trying to allow our project teams and the people within our community speak for themselves and give them a platform for their voices rather than speaking on behalf of them. And so I think that's one thing that also comes in mind with narrative, is who is getting to talk.
Something that I think a lot about when it comes to sustainability is a lot of initiatives around sustainability that are kind of tacked on as an afterthought and a program and maybe even an advertising tool, where I think of sustainability as really a core principle and ethic that you bring to everything that you do. And it's really important to bring that when you're starting a project or founding a business, to really think about things over long term and shift our mindset to a multi-generational mindset. And I think often sustainability or resilience is thrown around in kind of this like short-term ways, like what is our short-term resilience, but it really is about shifting the thinking to a multi-generational thinking.
Not sure I have much more to add to that. Just being around the students and seeing all of the different initiatives that have come out, especially even for my organization, from a worm bin to a sawmill. It's just like there's so many different ideas about what sustainability is. It's very interesting to see it all come to fruition.
Yeah, I can add a little bit in the context of the Campus Sustainability Fund, what it means to shift the narrative as a grant-making body and as a funder, to hopefully, bring some more space for the projects to really be able to share. And I think, for some context and to maybe demystify, the CSF has been around since 2009. We started as a grassroots student movement, which was a campaign across 5 years. And the goal was really to create student agency in decision-making spaces for the University of Washington. And so we were established in 2009. And, we have the privilege of having been able to basically support more than $4 million worth of projects, which is almost 300 projects now over that time period. And for us, like I think a lot of the times as a grant making organization, there are difficult power dynamics, which some of that is inevitable, but we try to really have a democratic process where we are student led, we're student governed with the committee with us here today. And then all the projects that we support are either led by students or have a very strong student leadership in it and directly benefits the students on campus. And so we really try to make it where the students are the ones that are contributing the money and therefore should have the opportunity to decide what priorities they want to put it into. And so, it's special to get to hear from the projects here today and get to see kind of the layers to the CSF.
Yeah, thank you for that, everybody. I think it's really beautiful what y'all said about your different definitions of sustainability, but they're all so connected in resilience and multi-generational learning and student power, all that. So I think there's a lot of beauty when it comes to current definitions of sustainability and what it means to shift that narrative. All right. So in moving on to the next question, I think that's also a very beautiful transition. Shifting the narrative of sustainability is, in what ways does your organization center student power and perspective within your team? And how does that play into the work you do?
I can tackle this one first. I would say within our Meadow project, we work on sort of a system of elders and then all of us students together. And we have the Dean of the College of Built Environments, the Director of Decolonization for the Burke Museum, and then the grounds lead for the area of campus that we're in. And they are really kind of our three elders that guide us. And then it's the culture that's built from there of all the students. It's a non-hierarchical system. And we engage in leading projects as someone feels passionate or that it's very needed. And we all step in to support one another as we have capacity to do so. So it really builds this culture where students can take initiative and manage the meadow in the way that they see fit.
Yeah, I would say within the CSF committee itself, we are entirely student run with faculty or staff assistants. But we have 8 student representatives from a bunch of different organizations on campus. We have 2 grad students from our graduate student governing body. We have 2 undergraduate students from our undergraduate governing body. We have the UW Sustainability Rep. We have someone representing the Ethnic and Cultural Center. We have someone representing First Nations. And so that being said, I think CSF is really trying to broaden perspectives by bringing in a lot of diverse backgrounds into the decision-making process of grant making, which I think in turn leads to us funding so many cool projects like we have here who also have those priorities in mind.
Yeah, to build on that, another big part is because we are so lucky to have students from all over campus with all of these different perspectives, is incorporating those into decision making is super, super important. Our committee is very democratic. We do participatory budgeting, so we kind of all decide what the priorities are for the next year. It's not like the staff just decide things. And as chair, me and the vice chair, we work super closely with the staff. So even like outside of the committee, it's mostly students. So we're able to have these like communities and to build these connections in order to have everybody feel welcome to share their perspectives and make sure we can do the best we can for the teams we're funding.
I think for First Nations, we're an entirely student-led organization, just like I've heard from a lot of these other organizations that are here today. And we really do love to focus on the volunteer work, especially with Powwow. We have usually around 100 student volunteers from every walk of life kind of integrated in this whole process. I think a lot of it is about not only empowering Native students, but educating the larger population of the University of Washington in our case. And I think a lot of it is gaining that knowledge as a student group rather than always providing solutions. I think it allows for students to be able to expand their own growth and have that empowerment within themselves, because I think some of that sustainability is about sustaining knowledge within your community and being able to pass that along and have your generations in front of you prepared and ready to continue these traditions and continue these events that are kind of like good medicine for your community. So I think that's something that's really important to us.
For the Salvage Wood program, our graduate student Marley Teal wrote the entire grant for the project, and then she's also managing that grant. So she's benefiting by getting the grant management experience. And then the ultimate beneficiary is the students that get to use that wood for projects. And you made a table out of, so you made a table out of one of the campus streets that had to be removed for maybe a new building, or it was had a disease or something. So it benefits the students, and that's probably the most interesting part about the project.
Yeah, I can share a little bit just about, we talk about like the CSF staff, and we have one full-time staff member who's not a student, but the rest are students. So I myself was a graduate student, Maddie's a graduate student. We have 2 undergrads working. And so I think if I'm reflecting on my 3 years being with the CSF, I think one of the most empowering and impactful things is just trying to demonstrate that like students do actually have the power to really like be leading these processes and having them be student governed, and also affirming our ability. So whether that is like the 3 projects that are here with us today are all large grants, but we also have a mini grant series that we opened up for basically trying to make grant making more accessible, understanding that historically those that are entering grant making are going to have access to more resources, whether that's a trusted faculty advisor, whether that's knowledge of how you even put together a grant making application. And so we've been trying to open up the accessibility and having actual workshops with making sure that we can have more projects. And it's been really cool to see how it's changed the type of things that we get to fund, just from changing the structure of how we enter this process. And so it's been exciting to see a lot more student-led initiatives, and the fact that there is access to a pool of money is, it's very rare, unless I feel like you're a scientist at an institution. If you're a student, like if you're applying to NSF or another group, that you could even have access to grant money. And so I think we take that pretty seriously and try to make sure that it's available to as most of the UW students as possible.
Following up on that, and also Kennedy's comment from earlier about powwow, I think something that is really special that we're able to do is incorporating sustainability of these projects, which can be really difficult when it's student run because students graduate very quickly, especially undergraduate students. But powwow, this was, I believe, the 54th. And a lot of the mini grants are ones that are for cultural groups that have been putting on their events for like decades. And so we're able to we're able to fund and support these really cool projects that are sustaining both with the students that are currently there, but also we focus on making sure that there is a structure that's in place so that way students can continue the work.
I think kind of speaking on that, I think more than anything, being able to give a space where minorities can feel like they have the opportunity to have their voice kind of represented, even if it is for a short period of time or even if there's a quick turnaround. I think it does not only support like community engagement, but I think it does just help with an overall sense of belonging in the UW community and in a university in general. So I think a lot of CSF and funding and powwow and all of this together is just about being able to have a variety of voices be represented.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just curious, as a quick follow-up, this is to everybody. I'm hearing a lot about student power that is happening, that has happened. I'm curious to see how that student power will be shifting narratives or shifting sustainability in the future, and like what processes are in place for that.
I mean, I would start off by saying I feel like there's always work to be done. I think that through CSF, we've been able to do a lot more in shifting the narrative than before its creation. And I have personally loved seeing the definition of sustainability shift from something that's just environmental to something that can also be cultural throughout campus. And that being said, I think that there is always going to be a lot of work to do because we're living in a country and a society that's built off of oppression and colonization. And so just working to decolonize on an individual and institutional level and work throughout that, I think, is a big part of student power and uplifting these groups. And yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
I think sustainability as a whole and opportunities that CSF provides are exactly what allows for groups to be represented, for them to thrive, for them to have the ability and the hope to say, okay, see you next year at the end of a powwow, and have that support system that seems and does create a more sense of permanence that doesn't make everything feel very temporary and kind of gives people a place. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, at the same time, with the longevity of these projects, they're still different every year. And because each student is a different person, they each have different lived experiences that influence their perceptions and their perspectives. And so they all are just unique in a different way, as the same way our committee is. Different leaders have different ideas about how we can best serve our community. And so I don't know how it's going to evolve into the future. And I think that's really exciting that I don't know that.
Just speaking to sort of the future of the Burke Meadow project and what we're looking forward to building into the future is this concept of food sovereignty and reconnecting Indigenous and First Nations people with their first foods, and proving that you can grow these foods within an urban landscape and harvest them and keep these cultural practices alive. I think that's a big part of resilience, and also showing that native plants provide so much value, and not only are they easier to maintain, but they can be eaten and support people in the future.
Beautiful. Oh, we all know.
No, I was just going to ask me, would you mind talking about the Native Gardens project?
The farm?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So our project has been around since 2019 as the Burke Meadow, and this year the consortium that manages it, the partnership between the Burke Museum, UW Landscape Architecture Department, and then the grounds, that consortium was also given the Native Students plot at the UW farm. So we now have a farm lead, and there's traditional medicines that have been grown there, and we're actually working towards a community engagement session with Native students on campus to gather ideas and create a design for what students would like to see, or what Native students would like to see in that plot, as we are expanding going forward. So medicines, but we're also hoping to expand to more traditional foods that we don't currently grow in the meadow, one of which is the Three Sisters, is something that we're thinking will likely grow.
Thank you so much for answering that. That is really cool. It sounds like there's a lot of different processes already in place, but then there's that uncertainty, which is really exciting. And speaking on behalf of CSF, we just hired 2 new undergraduate students because our current undergraduate students are graduating at the end of the year, and it's really exciting what they'll be bringing to the CSF, because they're very community minded and community based, and so very, very cool, exciting things happening. All right. Okay, so moving on to the next question. How does your organization facilitate and engage student voices outside of your core team?
So the UW Ground Shop, we have a tree inventory that has all of our trees mapped and the species and relative size. And occasionally we'll have a forestry student or other student wanting to do some sort of research project ask for that data. So we provide the data that we can. Sometimes recently somebody asked to take some leaves from the famous cherry trees to map the genome. And when we can, we try and provide assistance and facilitate those, because we're there because the students are there. So we try to help when we can.
I think in the case of the powwow, just as we have our officer team, we also try and make sure that we uplift students who are just generally in the Native community on our own campus. One of the ways we do this is by hosting committee workshops and having committees within the powwow planning process for things varying from art and promotional abilities all the way to funding and grant writing. I think we not only like to have that fulfillment of, learning professional development, but also being able to create that community atmosphere. So a lot of what we do is people who are outside of the officer team. We had 2 wonderful freshmen this year, Kat and Parker, step up to the plate this year and really help with PR and outreach for our powwow. So I think a lot of it is just kind of making that connection to people who are incoming and people who are just maybe not directly involved, but who are interested and who are willing to make that difference. And I think there's so many people that you'll find along the way who are willing to do so.
So we have a core team of students that tries to stay engaged with the meadow every month, see what's growing, if there's weeds, if it needs new planting, what the meadow needs from us. But almost all of the maintenance that we do, we spread invitations out broadly, and they're all open to the public. So we host work parties where we're weeding, or kind of regular maintenance, or planting party where we're planting camas bulbs. And one very special event we host is the weaving, where we have master weavers come and guide students in weaving these baskets that we put into the meadow to hold our camas and protect it from the bunnies. And then this year we actually had a prescribed burn of the meadow for the first time. So that was open to the public and to all students, and we had professors bring their classes, particularly from ecological restoration classes, to observe the burn and see kind of what it looked like to bring these cultural practices back to the land. And this spring, we're seeing a diversity of plants we've never seen before kind of pop up in the meadow. So it's really exciting to engage kind of the broader public in this. Yeah.
I was actually in one of the ecological restoration classes that came and did a work party, and we also got to witness the prescribed burning, which was a really valuable experience. So I just wanted to put that out there because it was very cool to see that in a scientific context. Within the CSF committee, I would say that a big part of our structure is having those students from different organizations on campus. And the goal with that is that all of our student representatives then go and talk to the departments they're representing and therefore try to engage a bunch of different organizations on campus rather than speak for them. And so I think that's also been something that's very valuable and given us a network that has allowed us to reach more project teams and have more students get involved with what we do. Our meetings are also open to the public and online, so you can find us pretty easily.
Yeah, to add on to that, a lot of what we do with the project teams is obviously we try to support them as much as possible and make sure that they're in line with like our project criteria and our values, but we never want to like step on them and be like, no, you have to do it this way. Our project and grants coordinator, who the new undergrad was just hired, always like meets with teams, make sure that we are supporting them and uplifting their voices as much as possible while still providing like support and a structure for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say like there's a lot of amazing work happening on campus. It's a little impossible to know everything that's happening. And so one of the greatest joys that I've had is that actually for my work, which is supporting the graduate studies, right? Like I actually, because sustainability is so expansive, like a lot of what I was doing in my position is you're just going out and you're meeting people, like whether that's going to the farm or whether doing a harvest day or whether, I just went to a really amazing sustainable fashion event, which I'll give a shout out to Mesh for their Decepticon event. But it's like there's always so many things happening. They had a panel of 5 different like artists that are also having their own businesses and they work in sustainable fashion and they're trying to disrupt basically the waste stream. And like there's all of this work that pops up that is related to sustainability, but maybe it's being presented in a different lens. And so I really think like the task for us as an organization is trying to really unite those narratives. And I am a strong believer that this is a youth-led movement. And so the fact that it's on UW's campus, I think is an incredible example of like the larger things that are happening within our society. And so it's like, yes, it's a youth-led movement. We've inherited it. It's a movement that all of us are supposed to be a part of, and it also requires all of us. And so we need to figure out how to come together across disciplines and really put together our resources to start answering some of these questions of, how do we create a more sustainable future?
I think some of it too is I realized just how amazing it is that we have so much accessibility to these programs and so much accessibility to the various like cultural groups on campus and different events that are occurring. I mean, Powwow itself is open to the public, not only students on campus, but the greater Seattle community, and we even get visitors from out of state. So I think a lot of it is acknowledging the effort that goes into seeing a variety and an array of people represented, and like even events from other cultural groups like Timeless Taiwan and other events that we see on campus, or even, the Meadow Project has multiple opportunities to make sure that not only like student voices are heard, but like communities that are around Seattle are able to kind of be ingrained and continue making this movement super prevalent. Because I know that's a goal of most people here, is just making sure that this movement is heard and continued to grow upon.
No, definitely. I think, go ahead, Sophia.
I was just going to add that I think there's tons of sustainability work being done on campus that people would not consider sustainability work, even the people who are doing it. And that is going back to the earlier question, why shifting the narrative around sustainability is so important. Because I think, and I was not part of CSF back when it was starting, but I think the definition of sustainability, how we define it and how the greater campus defines it, has changed so much in that time. And so all of these cultural groups that we get the opportunity to support and work with are great examples of sustainability, but they might not have like known that or considered themselves that before the shifting has started. And I think that there's going to be so many other incredible projects that tie all of these perspectives together and all of these different types of sustainability together.
Yeah, I would say adding on to that, even when we're getting grant applications, there'll be times when I'm reading them and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about that. And I think that's part of what makes CSF as an organization so valuable on campus, because we need outlets where something like the definition of sustainability can be so open to change over time, because when those rigid definitions exist, we're not seeing growth. And so I think it's just really beautiful to get to see a bunch of people on this panel here who get to be a part of projects that maybe we wouldn't have considered sustainable 15 years ago, because it absolutely is.
Yeah, thank you. And just a shout out to, like, as to what y'all are saying, there's so much incredible work being done on UW campus. And if you'd like to check out some of the projects that we we are talking about, go to our website at CSF, uw.csf.com.edu. And we'll have a project portfolio on there, but just so many incredible projects of like students who couldn't make it out here today because it is in the middle of the school day. But yes, and I am also, all right.
Can we take a break for a commercial break?
All right, perfect. Okay, so it is a commercial break. We will see you out here in 3 minutes. Enjoy the commercial.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Love food? Here's some storage tips to keep it fresh longer. Store cut fruits and vegetables in the fridge. Place in reusable containers. Keep bread in the freezer for longer storage. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
Tune in to Real Estate and Money every Tuesday afternoon from 2:30 to 3 here on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Join your hosts Violetta Strash with John L. Scott Kent North and Tina Lombard with Guaranteed Rate Affinity. They'll help you navigate the waters of our volatile real estate market and offer you some guidance on how to make your hard-earned money work to make your dreams come true. Learn about current trends, get tips on financial matters, and have fun, interactive discussions about your home inside and out. That's Real Estate and Money.
Greetings. This is your host, DJ Neftali, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the best DJ in the Seattle area. You can catch me every Monday at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Like I said, this is DJ Neftali, the best reggae in Seattle, Washington, the best radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Come on, right?
Sediment cleanup of the lower Duwamish River has begun. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the members of the Lower Duwamish Waterway Group, which includes King County, the City of Seattle, and Boeing, have begun sediment cleanup of the Lower Duwamish Waterfall Superfund site. This important environmental project will address sediment pollution and help restore the health of the Duwamish River. Starting in the waterway's upper reach, construction activities extend from the south 102nd Street Bridge down straight to the Duwamish Waterway Park. Over the next 3 years, in-water activities will occur from October to February, ending in February 2027. Visit ldwg.org to learn about the upper reach cleanup and sign up for email updates.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
And also, all right, to reintroduce myself, my name is Patty. I usually program director. We can go back.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Brown. I'm with the Campus Sustainability Fund. I'm our manager of program operations.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the chair of the CSF committee.
Hi, I'm Clara. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the UW Sustainability Representative on the Campus Sustainability Fund Committee. Sorry for the acronyms.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kennedy, and I'm a descendant of the Grand Portage Band Chippewa tribe representing First Nations UW as their former fundraiser chair.
Hi, I'm Camille Forrest. I'm Métis, Red River Métis Cree Ojibwe, and I'm representing the Burke Meadow Project as a research assistant with them.
Hi, I'm Sarah Shores. I'm the University of Washington campus arborist, and I am one of the recipients of the Salvage Wood program from the CSF.
Awesome. Thank you all. And thank you again to Rainier Avenue Radio for having us on here. We just had a little bit of conversation around sustainability and what that means to us, shifting narratives, what each organization does, both on campus and beyond in the greater Seattle area. And my first question back is, if you had access, what would you do in terms of sustainability moving forward?
I can start with this, and this is something that we've kind of been talking about as an organization recently. And I think the biggest thing that would do to support sustainability on our campus and beyond is centralizing everything, creating a hub, because like we were talking about earlier, we have all of this amazing work being done on campus and all of these resources available for students. But if you ask, especially undergrad students, do you know about any of this? The answer is almost always no. A lot of people just there isn't the accessibility available for people to kind of tune in and for people to be aware of all of the great work that's happening. And I think that is true for the larger community compared to UW, because UW can be a little bit of a bubble, especially campus is big, campus is a gorgeous place to be, kind of just stay on campus. So I think expanding, but also making it clear what work is being done through centralizing and having all the work be more connected.
I think I can kind of relate to that. I know we have lots of sustainability initiatives within the Native community on campus. However, I feel like as much as there is some overlap, there's a lot of times where it falls through because we don't know the exact places in which these organizations are operating. And so I think having that collaborative aspect to it would really help in being able to kind of work together to have a more united front in those terms. And I think also part of that is being a university affiliated program. I think there's a lot of weight on students to do the best that they can do and kind of operate for themselves. And I think a lot of it should be sustainability really should be a core initiative for this university. And I think a lot of it should be about the university's role in helping encourage students to create an environment where sustainability really is the forefront of our attention.
I would say a couple of things that have excited us recently in our project is sort of creating circular connections on campus where we've connected with one of our leaders with grounds to locate areas on campus where dogwood needs to be removed and harvested materials and use that for our weaving. And it feels like there's so many disciplinary silos still in our academic system and even hierarchical systems that prevent communication. So I think building more interdisciplinary relationships so that we can really create these circular relationships. There's so many needs and so many materials, and connecting people or making connections between those, I think is a big part of sustainability moving forward. And that's pretty much what you guys do.
Yeah, that's true. I think creating those relationships, that's huge. I know that I've cut Western red cedar limbs for different ceremonies for the Native community in the past, and just having that relationship and knowing that there's at least one point person within each discipline that you could go to goes a long way. And I feel like the grants, they require you to have collaborations with other entities. So that's very good.
Yeah, kind of echoing what everyone already said, I think that one of the biggest pitfalls of academia is that you can pigeonhole yourself in your own research so intensely that you no longer become aware of anything outside of it. And so I think one thing that's really important is also making sure that professors are connecting with the student life and the work happening on campus. Because I think when that does happen, for example, when we in my ecological restoration class got to visit the Burke Meadow, ended up being so much more of a teaching experience than what could have happened in a classroom, even just reading about it. And so I think we definitely need to prioritize creating community that's sustainable, not only horizontally, but vertically as well.
Just kind of to show my appreciation for the work you guys are doing. I feel like the projects you guys are funding are starting to create a bit of that network. Like, I didn't know that you worked on Powwow, but I've attended Powwow and just was so grateful and shocked that that was hosted by the university I was at. And then I've also met you through my work. And I think the overlaps, we're starting to, like, you guys are starting to fund kind of a system of different projects where people are working on it, but we're also benefiting from other projects that you guys are funding.
I think this overlap really gives me hope for what the future of even like my event looks like, how we can be not only culturally sustainable, but environmentally sustainable and create more of a ability for Native people to kind of collaborate with the initiative of the Native Garden of sustaining their cultural foods and having that be something that's brought to the bigger public. In an event like Powwow, I think it really gives me hope for something that could grow into something even bigger.
I mean, the Powwow is incredible. I don't know if it can be it is a regional poll. I was in California and I met this woman who's making earrings that says she comes up annually for the Powwow. And it's just, I think, for a lot of these events, like, I think, we are on the UW campus, but also we try to make more connections. I mean, I think for a lot of us as well that are doing this work, like, we know we're eventually going to graduate. I think some of us defer and we get more graduate degrees, but like, we will eventually be leaving. And so I think, when it is that time, I think, the hope, at least that I've had, is that it's not going to be, we're going to look back at the time in university when we were leading this project and we were like, wow, that was incredible. I'm not going to have access to that again. But it's more of, how do we create those pathways to make sure that we're actually working with a lot of other local environmental justice organizations, sustainability groups, so that there's actually opportunities for these students to continue leading that work, and that we're actually like instilling this belief that, like, if it's not there, we can go ahead and we can create it. And I think that is one of the more difficult things with like what grants are available beyond UW's campus, which is why it is such a privilege to have access to student fees that allows to happen. But yeah, I mean, for that question of like the ideal, it's too exciting. And so, like, we're here talking a lot about our grant making today. I feel like we also have built out more of an educational program. And that I wish that, like, if we had no restriction on resources, that like we could have a larger team that could just start really putting out more teach-ins on campus, more materials, more like, books, because it's beyond like the project management experience that you get. It's like, how do we also invite people into that conversation without that barrier? You need to be doing a project.
Yeah, for having things that like last beyond graduation, how do I get a table from Salvage Wood? You said you just have a table. How do I get on that?
So as part of my program, I'm a landscape architecture student, and we do a studio every quarter that focuses on design. So we did a furniture design studio, and for our furniture design studio, we got to go and look at the salvage wood and the whole system, like how you guys mill it on site and the solar drying process. And we got to choose our wood. And I did find it a very inspiring part of the process that I had access to madrone wood, which is my favorite tree. I grew up on the West Coast, and madrone trees like are near and dear to my heart. And it's like a wildly dense wood, and you can never really find it otherwise. So it's really special that I got to work with it and now get to eat my breakfast on that table.
I'm jealous of you right now. I want a campus table. I might have to take the class. The The mill was also a sustainability grant, and the kiln is a solar kiln that was designed and built by the students with the help of our carpenters, our facilities carpenters. And they just to speak to the madrone wood. So you can't just go buy madrone wood. You can't go to Urban Hardwoods or any lumber store and buy that type of wood, because I don't think there's enough of it in the size that we've been managed to get it from campus. And the madrone wood, and then we also have rhododendron wood. So it's very special and very unique. Plus, it has the backstory of you can see exactly where that wood came from, if that tree was inventoried, and have that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think kind of adding on, it's just so valuable to see like the community that gets built around this kind of grant making. And I feel like in my experience, once you're tapped into that community, it's so vast and expansive and powerful. I feel like I didn't know Sophia before this year, and now I see her every 5 minutes around campus. And so I think in my ideal world, that would be something that's more accessible to everybody, whether that's through outreach, education, teaching, workshops, ideally all of the above. But I think it's all about having access to that community and creating spaces to be able to learn from each other. And I think the more we centralize that, coming back to everybody's point from earlier, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, once you're in like the sustainability and the environmental and like the activist communities on campus, like you're in it, like it's all the same people are doing a lot of these things. And I think as cool as that is to like be like, oh, I see Clara in this, and then she's also in this, I really want to expand that and make it more accessible. So it's not just like the same group of students that are all invested because we're the ones who know about the things that are going on. And we had the opportunity to learn about it just from like getting lucky freshman year or something to join the right group at the right time. Like if we can build that out and have everybody have these opportunities, I think that would be really special.
Yeah, I just learned that we had a special coffee roastery on campus. Does anyone know about that? Yeah, I learned about it because we have a vermiculture and like basically compost project with UW Farm and with grounds management. And y'all have been getting some coffee grounds, and I had inquired about it. And then I learned that we have this special coffee roastery on campus, and I got to try some of the coffee, and it's delicious. And so I don't know who we have to talk to about the contracts on campus, but we should expand.
Is there a name for that, Tatiana?
Yeah, Husky Grinds.
Husky Grinds.
Right?
Yeah, I think like what y'all are saying, sustainability, the web of sustainability, as we're shifting the narrative, is getting bigger and bigger, but it's also small. Like when you think about it, you're seeing folks around campus, like Tatiana mentioned, who are involved in arts and like fashion, and that's sustainability. And it's beautiful, the overlap of community within campus. And I'm also curious to know, because Kennedy, I know you spoke about how powwow was something that was open to the public. So I'm curious to know what communities y'all have built a relationship outside of UW, if any.
I think we have a plethora of communities we work with outside of UW, a lot of tribal communities that we try and work with. I think tribal relationships with any tribe from Puyallup to even just tribes that we have students affiliated with. We are an intertribal group, so lots of tribes even from Alaska like Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian. I think it's really interesting to see how we make and foster these relationships, even indirectly, not through First Nations exactly, but even through adjacent programming such as the Intellectual House on campus, as well as New Scholars, which is for our Native students who are transferring into the University of Washington or having their first year at the University of Washington. We do lots of work with finding different tribal or even like drum groups or pulling groups and canoe families who will let us have the experience of pulling a canoe. And I think there's lots of different ways in which we reach out to people who are willing to share their knowledge with us and willing to increase that visibility for us. And I think a lot of that networking really does pay off, because at powwow, like I said, we have vendors all the way from Wyoming and different people who come to dance or participate in the intertribal activities. And I think it's very beautiful to see how all of this kind of comes together to create an event that is so vast and so expansive.
For the Burke Meadow, I would say we have these events where everyone can come, and we are ready to engage in conversation, kind of constantly expand our network. We do a fair bit of work with the city of Seattle. They've reached out to get sort of our plant list, and we're kind of a hub for sharing information about ecological restoration of the Puget Sound lowland meadows, and particularly camas is a focus for us as an important Coast Salish food. So growing camas. We also have partnered with also local tribes. And then there was one other one I was thinking of. I can't remember right now. I'll come back to it.
Yeah, when you think of it, you can pick up the mic and let us know.
I guess I have a question. Is like, because on our perspectives, right, like when we're funding these projects, one of the requirements that we have is typically that, like, because, you know, we have access to grant funds and we don't have, I mean, we have a limited amount every year, is that we try to really prioritize putting money towards projects that otherwise might not be able to happen. So if we think they're really, really well resourced and they don't necessarily need us, we try to defer to another group. And so I guess maybe some reflections on how that has changed things. Or, you know, I think for us, I guess maybe this is more a conversation about like labor. But for, you know, one of the things that we do try to support is, you know, student stipends to actually get the work done. Because we noticed across the years that, like, for the continuity things, right, like students aren't going to be able to continue prioritizing it if they have other things that are competing for the time. And so maybe, like, I know for me, CSF paid for my graduate school, and that changed things dramatically, where I would have never been able to endeavor in any of this, and my career would have been a very different trajectory. And so, like, that's my quick reflection, but if there's any from you all.
I actually do have a reflection on this, but it's more so to do with the salvage wood program, which is the furniture studio is something that's been around for a long time. My program in my first year, I heard wonderful things about it, but it was cost prohibitive for me. Like, before the salvage wood program, you had to buy the wood to participate in the to do the furniture building. And if you wanted a nice piece of furniture, people were spending, you know, hundreds of dollars on their wood. And I was like, I'm already paying for tuition. I can't afford to pay any more money. And then I heard about the salvage wood program in my second year, and I was like, or my last year, it was the first year that my program engaged in it. And I was like, I can do this studio that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. So.
Yeah, our there's no way the ground shop would have been able to mill and provide lumber for the students if it wasn't for this grants. We're perpetually understaffed and underfunded. So it was imperative that we had the extra money just to cover the costs of milling the wood, because it is time consuming and takes a lot of labor. And yeah, I'm just really happy that the students get to use it. That was the missing piece, is we didn't have that end user, and being able to provide that for free. And it's not just the cost, it's also a lot of students don't have a way to take a vehicle to go pick up that lumber and a 10-foot board. So yeah, that's great.
It is no small feat to put on a powwow. So I think my eyes were very open this year as fundraiser chair, looking at just the vast list of expenses that is going to be a barrier to putting something on that seems just so necessary for our community. And I think CSF really kind of brings back that hope of, okay, there are people who are still willing to work with us. There's still people who want to make sure that this comes to fruition. And I think in an environment where it can be so hard to find that support system, I think it's invaluable, like, honestly, especially being such a minority on our campus and having such a president to continue to support ourselves. I think having these opportunities and having different communities, even just like the Meadow Project and different people around our community, being able to like give us a list of opportunities that are happening around us really does make all the difference. That's the biggest part.
I think adding on, even just being on the committee, like when you're on the committee, you get paid a stipend, and there are a lot of other committees on campus where that's not the case. It's, you want to make a difference, and so you're volunteering your time. And for a lot of students, that ends up being a barrier to even get involved in this work in any capacity, whether it's on the project end or the grant making end. And so I think it's also really valuable that almost everybody involved in CSF is getting compensated for their time in a way that's really unique, and also reduces a lot of financial barriers for people, myself included.
Yeah, I think something that we have been not like explicitly calling out today that's a big part of sustainability is accessibility. And I think that that's what a lot of the funding goes to or in like should be focused on and can be something that isn't always centered at UW. And so I think being able to focus on accessibility, whether that's financial accessibility, whether that's physical accessibility with like not having a car to go, because like who has a car in Seattle, especially like a truck to get like, I could not even think of how I would manage to do that. So I think opening up these opportunities to students is just like so cool to see all of these projects doing that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll answer for the Burke Meadow now instead of talking about the wood. But I know that the Burke Meadow project has been around since 2019. And so they've built this structure where I'm currently training the students that will do the monitoring and the stuff that I'm leading on after I go. And I think having the foreseeability of funding and like long time horizon funding really allows us to build a project where we're making a broader impact on campus, and we can build a system where the students know they come in their first year, if they start working with the Burke Meadow, that can really support their education. And that was definitely true for me.
I think that it's really important that we do acknowledge the amount of work that goes into the students that do try and create this movement, that do try and like push this movement. Because like, not only just speaking for myself, but from the experience of multiple officers and First Nations and in various on-campus clubs, it can be really taxing and really hard to continue to push for that when there are so many obstacles that are put in your place. So I think it's the more that we can make sustainability something that is supported by not only like the university, but also just by different entities around and support the students directly, the more that we'll have more success in making it more of a priority for everyone.
Definitely. Like I'm hearing a lot about how with limited access to labor and financial resource, community really like is so important, coming together and building that network and that web of sustainability and relying on different organizations on campus and beyond in the greater Seattle area is just it's essential in this work. And yeah, no, thank you so much for all of your stories and all of your voices on this. And I know we have a minute left, so does anybody just have like one word to say to close us off?
Thank you, Maddie.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us with the Campus Sustainability Fund. And thank you so much to Rainier Avenue Radio for having us on here. Really appreciate it. And have an amazing rest of your afternoon, everybody.